Welcome everyone, it is 3 p.m. and it's time for the server room show. This is episode 33. As many of you might have guessed, after the 3 long full episodes of exploring the history of BSD with the permission I was given from using the presentations and the notes from Dr. Kirk McCusick, as a next episode, episode 33, it cannot come as a surprise that we continue a little bit on amongst the lines of BSD, and actually I want to talk about some venturing to FreeBSD on a Lenovo X220 laptop. When I picked out this laptop quite some time ago, one of the things I googled was how much this laptop could be compatible out of the box with BSD systems, and I have to say that it said that pretty much everything should work out of the box, and this is the experience I wanna talk about. As after a couple of I was like a week or a couple of days, I managed to use like more or less a week what I managed to set up, what I didn't, and how is it so far. So many people most of the time have problems with setting up the video driver on his or her computer, as FreeBSD by default it doesn't come with Xorg or a desktop environment installed. So there I followed the FreeBSD handbook, and it was pretty straightforward, as I had an Intel integrated GPU in this laptop. I just followed those couple of steps to install the necessary driver for it and enable a couple of make some changes on some configuration files and install Xorg. And in the beginning I did install GNOME, and I was up and running pretty quick, to be honest. I didn't waste a lot of time on that. The only thing that I don't know if it comes from this Intel driver or GNOME itself, even though the laptop itself has like 8 gigabytes of RAM. I had the graphics tearing issues on GNOME, even after I was looking up some optimization tricks shared by other people regarding these Intel cards, and to be honest, it didn't help at all. And as some of you might remember, I discussed it in a previous episode that on my main workstation I did change from GNOME to XFCE permanently. Then I decided that let's do the same, let's give a chance to XFCE before I dive any deeper into trying to mess up the configuration or probably do something which renders the computer unusable. So surprisingly enough, on XFCE everything was smooth and there was absolutely no tearing issue, and obviously it used way less resources than GNOME desktop environment was doing, and I thought that therefore it would be a better fit for this. I think it's like a 9 year old laptop right now. So yeah, it works very smooth. The tearing completely went away, and I'm happy to say that it's just fine on this laptop. Most probably even with the stock 4 gigs of DDR3 RAM would be more than fine. And to talk about a little bit things I normally miss from GNOME, I did mention that applications like Albert, which is like a launcher application, I can have a workaround for this GNOME's application viewer feature. I think that's how it's called. What this GNOME's application viewer feature does on the GNOME desktop is that using a shortcut or a key combination, or just clicking on activity, it gives you like a bird's eye view from your open windows. It gives you a search bar where you can type to look up documents or an application to launch, and if I remember, it gives you also like a launch bar on your left, so you can select from your favorite icons, or you can click and get into the app drawer. And pretty much this feature I always liked in GNOME, and it made me stick around all the time. But with the help of Albert, I can do this lookup or search for my installed application, and I can launch them. It also has this Google search integrations and everything, and I combine this with XFCE's application drawer plugin or icon, how to say. I can have an app drawer up on my panel on the top right, where I can click, and it gives me a drop-down list of all my open windows and applications, breaking down into workspaces, so I can even see on which workspace that actual application is open. So if you, even though it's on Linux, but as you see on my screen is exactly the same under XFCE on BSD, that I can see that now, for example, I have all my applications open under the server room show named workspace, and I could pick out any, and when I click on it, I get that into focus. So even if it was on a separate workspace, it would take me there. So I would really love to have somehow this part to integrate with Albert. I'm sure as it's expandable and has ways to script it and learn new tricks to it, I'm sure there is some way to have that lookup function when it searches for example, if I want to launch an application, it would be nice to see to show me also applications from my computer which I have open already, let's say on a workspace. So like that switching would be involve even less click than now. But the combining these two things, Albert and this XFCE application drawer or app viewer, I don't know what's the proper name for this module. Let me see if there is a chance to see it very quickly. Items. It's action buttons. Where is the clock? Action button. I think in the panel it's called action buttons. Is it possible? No, wait. Clock separated. No, it's called window menu. So it's an item you can add to your panel in XFCE called window menu, and that's the one which gives you what I just described. It's called window menu in XFCE panel. Combining that with Albert, I can completely have it as a workaround for GNOME's application viewer feature, and I pretty much don't miss GNOME anymore. So venturing further into how my experience was with FreeBSD, I had an interesting thing with the VLC player. When I first installed VLC player, I did from the binary repositories. And the thing is that I often use Samba shares where I keep my files like TV series or movies. I normally just browse in the file browser and just drag and drop or like open them in VLC. And I realized that each time when I was trying to drag and drop or open a media file from a Samba share, I got an error in VLC. It was not able to play it. The same file, however, played perfectly fine when it had on my local machine. With some googling, I figured that it had to do with the part of Samba, and some post even mentioned that it could be perhaps with credentials. However, in my case, the username password I use on the computer, it's the same username password which I need to use to access my Samba share with the appropriate permissions. I know it's probably not the best practice, but just bear with me. And therefore some posts mentioned that it's a good idea to check there in VLC preferences about these Samba settings in VLC. And when I went there, I figured out that I have that option completely missing from my VLC. So what I did, I uninstalled the binary package and reinstalled it from the ports tree, where indeed when you do a make configure or just a make install, it comes up with configurable options, and believe it or not, the option to build VLC for your machine with Samba option was not selected by default. So the moment I selected Samba feature to be included in the build, of course after it was working fine. However, just before that, I ran into another issue. I installed FreeBSD, the latest current one from the website, and it came with this ports tree or port snap, or however name you use for that, and it was constantly giving me errors when I was trying to build it. And after some another extra googling, someone mentioned that it's always good idea to do FreeBSD update fetch and FreeBSD update install to make sure that you are on the latest build. I did that. I got updated to the really latest one, and latest current one, and it was still failing for me. So a bit more googling took me to a separate post which mentioned that perhaps updating separately the ports collection, the ports tree, it's a good idea, and I did that. Port snap fetch, port snap update, and port snap extract, and indeed there was updates to the VLC directory which holds VLC. It was a bit newer version, and when I did the build this time, it worked, and Samba feature worked out of the box after this build, and my issue was resolved at once. Regarding package management, because I mentioned here binary packages and port snaps, when it comes to packages, you have relatively similar choices as of you used to Linux operating systems. You can install binary packages from repository with package install command. You can build things from source, or you can use a system which is for me most similar to Slackware's Slack builds system, if you know, familiar with that, which combines it's a combine or a hybrid of source code plus specialized build scripts or build instructions for make and whatnot bits and pieces to make sure that it builds on case of Slack builds on Slackware, and in the case of the ports tree and the ports collection in FreeBSD, to make sure it will build properly on FreeBSD. So it's a source code plus extra steps or bits and pieces in a script format, so to say, very similar to Slack builds system, to make sure that it will install on BSD, because many times it needs some extra steps involved or some extra parameter to build on BSD, whereas compared to Linux. And it's very simple to use. It's pretty much 2 commands you can use: make install. It pops you up the configuration options, or you can bring them up yourself with make configure, and pretty much that's it. It will build it, and it will create the binary application for your machine. Regarding virtualization, I tried with more or less success to make Virtualbox and PCem to run, because both from binary packages and from ports collection or ports tree, and also Bhyve. I had more or less success on that area. I do put in my show notes about Virtualbox that I had some issues with it when it comes to using the Windows 7 ISO. I always use to install virtual machines, and for some reason under Virtualbox it gets stuck sometimes at 5%, sometimes at 10 or 15%, and after it gives me an error. You can see the screenshots in the show notes. However, I was thinking that maybe it's an issue with Virtualbox, or with me not following properly the FreeBSD handbook how to install Virtualbox, and you have to make some settings to make sure kernel module is loaded, and add your user to the appropriate group, so you can launch Virtualbox and things like that. But I just figured out somewhere around like 10 minutes before this show airing live that I said, let me download from osboxes.org some example Virtualbox machines, and I grabbed the FreeDOS one and FreeBSD Linux machine, and believe it or not, both of them works perfectly, and even networking works out of the box using the bridge feature in Virtualbox, and bridging it through the VLAN interface, in this case on this laptop. So it looks like that it's something either with that ISO I'm using. I don't know if I copied it wrong from the Samba share, or what is happening with it. But I do see that it's not the fault of Virtualbox in this case, because I can boot up a Linux virtual machine and a FreeDOS one, for example. So it's not FreeBSD. It's not Virtualbox's fault under FreeBSD. It can easily be with the ISO I'm using, or perhaps the settings I gave to that machine. No one knows for the moment. I will try to put an update on the show notes the moment I figure out completely why it was failing. For example, if it works with another ISO, I will just say it was the ISO's fault. However, in the case of PCem, even though I tried from ports tree and from binary package while it builds, and after a long figuring out during 2-3 days where on earth I have to put ROM files for it to found, because it was keep telling me no ROM files, you have to add ROM files. When finally I figured that out, and for the people who interested to know, At least on FreeBSD, it's not how it is on Linux or Windows, because BSD is not Linux. It's going to be one thing I'm going to mention in a while. You have to place in FreeBSD in the same folder where the binary gets installed, being it from ports collection, ports tree, or from binary, which is /user/local/bin. That's where the PCem binary lives. And also, after 2-3 days, I figured out that the PCem.cfg config file also lives in the same place. So I could have specified where I want to take my ROM files and NVR files. I could have defined the path there, but I figured out before that, okay, let's see what happens if I put the ROMs folder inside /user/local/bin, and guess what, it works. The only slight extra thing I had to do is that I had to make sure that the ROMs folder inside, if you choose user local bin or some other folder, just make sure that specifying in the config file, you can specify in other folders. Just make sure that no matter what folder you use for your ROM files, make sure that you can also access it without root user. So make sure it's chmod properly, so you can execute PCem without root and can access your ROM files. The bad thing is, however, that for some reason I tried various ROMs and configs and simple machines, because all I want is just to have like an MS-DOS 320 machine up with Gem Desktop or Gem Writer or something similar. All the time, even if I run as a root user, even if I run as my normal user, I end up having a lot of segmentation fault errors, which immediately breaks the application and closes down. So I was, believe it or not, I was unable to, in some ROMs I was even unable to get into the BIOS, because it just kicks me out with segmentation fault and closes the emulation. Or I managed to set it up and you start installing and it just kicks you out. So I don't know, it would be nice to work PCem on FreeBSD. The thing is that I know that the same thing works on Linux and on Windows, and that was the reason why I was trying to so badly install Windows 7 on Virtualbox, because I said, okay, no problem, I will put PCem there, and I know that it works. I tried it, and I even have it set up, but as I mentioned in the beginning, probably that Windows 7 ISO or something there is wrong for whatever reason. I will update the show notes and you will see. I also tried the Bhyve, which is let's say the native virtualization baked into FreeBSD since a while, and I found little info regarding how to use it or how to set it up. I was able to follow some links I left in the show notes. I was able to install a Debian 9 virtual machine and even created the start and stop scripts for it. However, after the installation, when it came to the reboot part, I was unable to bring back to life after that, not even after a reboot. So these things probably come from my inexperience and lack of knowledge with FreeBSD clearly. So I really hope that in the future it is just going to improve, and I can make an updated episode on my experience, how it evolved, or how I got better, hopefully, in the whole thing. Another thing was regarding the Lenovo X220's built-in webcam, for which after suffering a few days and asking and googling around Mastodon, asking even a black cat, I know, physical cat, real cat, not cat as in a word of slang used on for a people, I managed to figure out 80% with the help how to make it work. 80% because it does what it has to do, but not 100% the way I want it. So for the built-in webcam on this Lenovo X220, you need to use a daemon called Webcamd. It can list and recognize USB interfaces built-in, like this webcam, and then you can run the proper line for that USB interface, the one you wanna call, and it will create a dev/dev/video device for your webcam on FreeBSD, so applications can access it, like Firefox, and you can use it in XFCE, for example, or can use it, for example, the Webcamd application. The Iridium Chromium-based browser on FreeBSD, for some strange reason, even after I figured out all the bits and pieces, was unable to use the camera, so I had to use Firefox, and XFCE was able to access the webcam without a problem. Strange, because other online webcam checker website do work and sees the webcam and can use it in Iridium browser. So it must be maybe it's some strange thing with the XFCE website itself. Issues I faced, which with the webcam part, was after reading some posts and asking around. The first thing was that I have to use Webcamd to load, and apart from Webcamd, I had to make sure that a kernel module called qs.ko, qs for BSD, was indeed loaded. And as far as I got with this, to load the module, I can load now at boot, and that part is taken care of. However, also the initialize this dev video webcam interface to be created with Webcamd after my logon. For some reason, I still have to do with the root user, even though my user is in the wheels group and in operators group, as some other people mentioned that you also have to make sure your user is in operator and video and multimedia groups to be able to use this created /dev/video interface on FreeBSD, your webcam. So some more googling, and yes, I had to make sure that my user had the appropriate additional groups added to it. Apart from wheel, just wheel was not enough, and once I started it, Webcamd as root, it loaded created the /dev/video interface. The kernel module was already loaded properly at boot. There was no problem with that. Loading Webcamd or Firefox, was able to find Webcamd is a webcam application to see your camera or take some photos. It's pretty much like the photo boot application on macOS, if you remember that one. So yeah, a bit of suffering and a couple of days of suffering with the webcam. I can say that works. I still have those issues to iron out regarding virtualization I mentioned. I need to check around Bhyve and the PCem. At this moment, I think I have no more hopes in it for the moment. I concentrate on Virtualbox and fix what I have to fix, and Bhyve. What I'm missing at this moment is VMware Horizon client, which I need for connecting to work. And even though it exists on Linux, there is no port for it on BSD, and I haven't found any way to have it installed. I asked around, so far I got no response. At that moment, that's the only reason why I couldn't use this laptop as a main machine to be able to work from home. So time is up. I had no time for my closing thoughts. I think I bring it up in another episode, which is about BSD and Linux, or BSD versus Linux. I will probably bring it up in some other episode. thank you very much, and see you next Saturday.